I have a really serious question that I think we really, as a country, we need to talk about. And this is serious stuff. David Ferguson wrote a piece for rawstory.com, and the headline is, "Trump says privately that a terror attack could save him and the Republican Party from a 2018 election bloodbath." And what he says is, faced with the likelihood of a blue tsunami in the 2018 midterm elections, President Donald Trump is holding out hope that terrorists will attack the country, reported the Washington Post on Wednesday. Quote, this is from the Washington Post. In private conversations, Trump has told advisors that he doesn't think the 2018 election will be as bad as others are predicting. He has referenced the 2002 midterms when George W. Bush and Republicans fared better after the September 11 terrorist attacks, these people said. Matt Iglesias over at Vox.com wrote, this is a frightening line of thought for an incumbent president and his team to be entertaining. If the president and his top staff, Iglesias said, are not so concerned with democracy but purely political power, that's a terrifying proposition. And if Trump, now this is not Iglesias, this is back to the article in Raw Story, if Trump believes that a terror attack will be a help to his political fortunes, asked Vox, how hard is he really working to keep the country safe? And I would take it even a step beyond that. Is he working to provoke a terror attack against the United States? He has certainly been antagonizing people unnecessarily. He's antagonized Kim Jong-un, he's antagonized Muslims, he's antagonized Mexicans, it just goes on and on and on. You'll recall, you know, when 9/11 happened and George W. Bush used this as a political tool, as a political weapon to become a wartime president, something that he had been wanting to do. You'll recall, if you go back in time to 1999, when Mickey Herskowitz, who was a longtime family friend of the Bush family, and he's an author and a ghostwriter for hire, was hired by the Bush family to write George W. Bush's biography. You had to publish a biography before you run for president. So in '99, Bush was planning on running for president. And they hired Mickey Herskowitz, and he recorded dozens, if not, over 100 hours of tape sitting down with George W. Bush. And then he sat down to take these words of George Bush and turn them into a book. And that book became the George W. Bush autobiography that was released when he decided to run for president. And one of the things that Bush had told Herskowitz, and Herskowitz ultimately, by the way, got dumped by the Bush family about halfway through the book project, and they hired another writer because the first draft of the book didn't, I don't know, it didn't suck up enough to Bush or something. But what George W. Bush told Herskowitz, and Cindy Sheehan testified before John Conyers' commission, before Congress, about this, and quoted Herskowitz. What George W. Bush said was words to the effect of, if I become president, I'm not going to make the same mistake my father did. You'll recall the original Gulf War that George Herbert Walker Bush had a year and a half before the election that he ultimately lost in '92, but before that election, he had a little war in Iraq, and he was very proud of the fact that the war only lasted 100 hours. It lasted a few days, kicking Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait, after he had essentially told Saddam Hussein, you can have Kuwait, sure, no problem. And George W. Bush's argument to Herskowitz was that that war didn't last long enough because it wasn't going on when the election hit. And if you're not having a war when the election hits, then you don't have the power, you don't have the popularity, essentially, of being a wartime president. So what George W. Bush said was, if I'm elected president, I'm going to invade Iraq. And he specifically identified Iraq to Herskowitz. He said, if I become president, I'm going to invade Iraq, and I'm going to have a successful war, and thus a successful presidency. And which, of course, is exactly what he did. You know, when after 9/11, prior to 9/11, I mean, we now know that Dick Cheney was actually lobbying for a war with Iraq prior to 9/11, and nobody, you know, there was no good rationale, no excuse for it. But after 9/11, I mean, they were saying weapons of mass destruction and all this stuff, but there was no sense of urgency here in the United States. Oh, yeah, you know, you got a terrorist over there in Iraq, so what? And plus, you know, well, actually, the Scott Ritter stuff, I guess that came after 9/11. So here we had a president in the Bush, you know, with George W. Bush, who was nakedly, openly willing to use an attack against the United States as a political tool, as a political weapon, as a political, you know, as a mouthpiece, essentially. Now, I know that there are some people, there's all kinds of wild conspiracy theories and some, you know, even rational conspiracy theories around 9/11. But very few people are asserting that George W. Bush actually created 9/11. But if you want to know what caused 9/11, I mean, it's not very difficult. You go back to 1998, Osama bin Laden in the New York Times talking about how because of George Herbert Walker Bush's invasion of Kuwait/Iraq, in order to make that happen, Bush the elder had to get Saudi Arabia to allow us to use an Air Force base in Saudi Arabia to stage our bombers to kick Saddam out of Kuwait. And bin Laden was furious about this. There were American soldiers, American GIs, men who were watching pornography and drinking alcohol, and women who were driving cars and showing their elbows on a U.S. Air Force base or on a Air Force base on a you know, staging ground inside the holy land of Saudi Arabia. And bin Laden considered that an absolute profanity. And in 1998, he told us if we didn't shut down that Air Force base, he was going to attack us. By the way, go back and look at it. George W. Bush shut down that Air Force base in 2005, as I recall. He definitely closed it. I'm pretty sure it was 2005. So, you know, we see kind of cause and effect there, right? We antagonized the Saudis, and particularly the Saudi radicals. This would be bin Laden and his friends, although there were a lot of people in Saudi Arabia who were very upset that American soldiers were on Saudi soil. We antagonized the Saudis, and what happened? 17 Saudis come over here, or 14 Saudis, I guess, out of the 19 hijackers, and knock down the Twin Towers. So what is Trump doing now? Is he antagonizing other Muslim groups? I mean, you know, he's sucking up to the Saudis now, but, you know, there are other Muslims in the world. Is he trying to provoke an attack? Is this what he thinks is going to help him with the 2018 midterms? I mean, this Washington Post article is in the context of the midterms, the elections that are coming up shortly. Is that what's going on? Or is it just all a coincidence? Or is it just, you know, is this the Reichstag fire, right? The bombing of the German parliament building was what propelled Adolf Hitler to power and to fame and fortune. 9/11 helped George W. Bush because of the way he used it. Hitler, the way he used it. What are Trump's plans? What do you think?